there, everybody. Okay, so our first exercise was to do the achromatic value mixing scale. Then we worked into doing some little mark making tests and studies, and I had recommended that, here were just 4 little ones, but if you wanted to do several of these to kind of play with the paint, there is a lot of value in that. But now we're going to try and take those lessons and turn this little vector graphic of a sphere into something volumetric. So we've got our Stay Wet palette here. We've got our value scale that we created earlier. As the palette started to get kind of contaminated, my whites turned into more of a 10. So I'm going to put some fresh white, and I'm going to use about chocolate chips worth, or excuse me, a Hershey's Kiss worth. And then my dark 100s kind of turned into a 90. So I'm going to put some fresh darks out. There we go. Okay, so this is not a all the way rule, but it's a good one to kind of start with. I often think it's a good idea to start with your negative space, which is the stuff behind, the boring, the not important, or the subordinate area in a painting, working your way up to your subject, and then the small details on top. That's not always the case, but it's a good way to start. And by doing that, you're gaining confidence with what's happening in the negative space and setting the tone and the value for the whole painting. So I have a little bit of water on my synthetic brush, and I'm going to start by painting the negative space with just white. So I'm taking quite a bit. And with these synthetic brushes, it's pretty cool. You can see I'm kind of like charging the brush where it doesn't matter. You can see that I can cut a circle by dragging the brush on its side. You would think that it might be easier to do it with a tiny brush, but it's actually that you're wanting to use the side of the brush because you can control how far it pushes down or how much it comes up. So I'm going to be careful as I drag it around the side. It doesn't have to be perfect. You're going to get a chance to correct it and shift it and change it as you go. So I'm just painting this with my titanium white. I'll talk about other whites in future videos. We have transparent mixing whites or zinc whites, and those really are pretty important when it comes to color mixing, but I'll get to that. We're using this titanium white right now, which is an opaque white. So I'm just gonna quickly lay in a little white around the ball, or what will become a ball. And then I'm gonna jump into my 10, maybe a little 30. So I kind of like double, triple loaded my brush. And I'm gonna crosshatch that into my whites so that I'm having a kind of complicated background that kind of feels like air or atmosphere. There's like a little bead of paint around the edge, which is going to be okay for later. We can activate some of that paint. But by starting with the white, it just kind of gave me a chance to make it feel atmospheric. So I'm adding more white, but my brush is a little dirty, and I'm kind of grabbing some of this gray, this 30, and moving it around on the surface. It's all about your edges too, making sure you're getting that paint right up to the edge. And when we start to paint in the sphere, you want to try and make it so that that outline and any of the raw paper goes away. You can see that that titanium white is opaque because I was just able to make that text go away. If we had transparent colors, that paint would still show through. Okay, so I'm going to jump to my shadow. So the most unimportant stuff, the next unimportant up to the most important, we're like setting the stage and the tone for it. So I'm going to grab a little bit of my black into my 90. And I'm going to lay that in my shadow. And this little drawing that's here is really just an idea. You don't have to stay within it perfect. I'm using our cross-hatching technique. I'm going to scrape out that dark. I'm going to grab some more of my light 10 and kind of cut into that shadow. And wipe off my brush, go back into my dark, and build that dark kind of on top, so that there's a little bit of a value scale even happening on the shadow. Go back in with more dark, a lot of layering. So those mark making exercises are hopefully giving you confidence to build up as you go. I'll keep mine really impressionistic and kind of gestural, but like we did in that other exercise where I took a clean, fairly dry, damp brush. If you wanted, you could make those shifts more subtle by working over them. If it got too sticky, you can wet your brush again. So if you wanted to kind of make it softer, you could. I'm gonna grab some white. Oops, there was a lot of black on there. Ha, I don't want that dark. So I'm gonna clean my brush. There's that, like, being in control of your values. There's a lot of paint here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my knife. I want that a lot lighter. I'm just gonna scrape that off. Find the value and save it. And I'm going to go back in with my white. Yeah, there we go. I'm going to take my cleanish dry brush, make that a little softer. We'll work back into that shadow again in a minute, but that kind of gets us started. You can see my kind of value scale that we worked on in the previous exercises coming into play in my foreground. Okay, so when we're working on something that's volumetric, we still want to think in terms of our value scale. So I'm going to act like, if here's my shadow, here's my light source coming in. So I'm going to have this be a 0, 30, 70, maybe a 50 in between, and my hundreds down here. So it's like you're just building that value scale across. So I'm going to start with my white. I'm going to shift to my 30. Using that cross-hatching technique, I'm going to shift to my 50. I want to work pretty quickly so that I can go back and make it softer and more subtle. Here's my 70. And then I'll go into my 90s and 100s. Cut that edge and then kind of cross hatch some of that. I'm going to use my clean brush again with a little water on it. If I'm dragging too much gray up, which I am, I'm going to clean my brush off. Add a little bit, just a little. add a little more white. And I'm taking that value scale and turning it into a curve. I'm going to grab maybe my 30. And we do a lot of layering. I'm going to grab the 10 and a little white. I'm going to clean my brush off, use some more white. And that cross hatching is allowing it to feel more volumetric. It got a little off center here, so I'm going to wipe off the brush. I'm going to take the clean white and try to reshape that a little. Acrylic is plastic, polymer emulsion, pigment, and water. So the plastic paint dries quickly, and then you can just edit and revise as you go. Kind of reshape if you need to. I'm going to kind of look at it from afar and see where it looks flat and see that I could add a little more dark here. Clean off the brush, but use a little bit of water. And see if I can make it a little more subtle. But again, I want to kind of leave mine a little painterly, so it feels like it's got some energy to it. Okay, I might add a little cleaner dark right at the bottom. When you lose an edge of darkness into darkness, light out of dark, it's called chiaroscuro. So it's like you almost can't see where it ends and begins. And you can do it here where it's dark, or you can come in and you can make edges closer in value on the light side too. And we call these open and closed edges, or lost and found edges. And it starts to make it look a little less like a construction paper sticker and more like it's sitting in space. Okay, so I want to take some of these values and activate them into the negative space. So I'm going to grab this like 30 here, and I'm just going to do a couple little flyaways. Go into some whites, lighten them up. There's an open edge where I'm kind of like breaking up that hard corner, that hard sharp side. Just to give it a little movement and make it a little more playful. But these are where your mark making studies can come in, and you can kind of try some different things. You can keep layering and layering. Okay, so then hopefully, because you had this really nice value scale set up, you have a pretty volumetric ball. I have a feeling if you had just started with the 0 and the 100, it would be quite a bit flatter. So it's by using these steps that you can start to make things feel volumetric, and using this kind of more subtle approach to bringing those values closer together, that it can start to become more believable. And then you can try all these different kinds of marks to make them have a different kind of feel or a different kind of atmosphere to the paintings. Okay, so I'm going to do a video on washing your brushes now, and then we'll get together and we're going to start to shift in to some recipes for color. we're going to do it just with red and green just to kind of get us started. And then in another lesson, we can start to talk about actual color theory. So it's the same process. We'll do the value scale. We will do one that's what we call high chroma. Then we'll do it again with low chroma, which is like, I really think the whole key to color theory as an easy button. It's like the beginning of it. Then we'll do mark making studies with color, and then we'll try a sphere in color. So I will see you in the next lesson. Send me your pictures of what you've made so far. Send me questions through email or direct message, and I'm here for you. Okay, I can't wait to see what you're making. See you soon.